I'd like to welcome you to this session on gamified immersive learning experiences. And during this session, we're going to talk about developing a game for coronavirus and how you can use some of the rapid prototyping tools that are available today to create other gamified learning experiences for a variety of applications. And these applications can include digital heritage applications, health applications, almost anything that you can imagine can be turned into a gamified learning experience. So as the participants are joining us, I'm going to make a start now and begin by asking you a question. And these are some questions for you. I'm going to load a poll in a second. And this series of polls, going to ask you whether you've used gamification in your personal business life, what you think it should cost to develop a coronavirus game, and who should the game be developed for, and what should the game objective be. So I'm going to load the poll now and launch the first of these polls. And I'll ask you to tell me if you've ever used gamification in your work or personal life. Wait for the answer to come in. Got 24 participants currently. We're expecting, or we've had about 70 people register for this event, so maybe some people have forgotten the registration key or password. Okay, so I'm going to finish this poll now and share the results with you. Okay, so 61% of you say you've used gamification in your life. So for the 22% who've say that they haven't used gamification in their life, I would ask you to think very carefully about things that you've done in your life where you've wanted to influence an outcome. And I'd be willing to bet that you've used gamification to achieve that outcome. So the second poll asks how much you would expect to pay for developing a coronavirus game. We'll go into detail about the context of the game and the sort of target market that the game will be developed for. But what do you think good quality coronavirus game would cost to develop? I'm talking here not about rapid prototyping. I'm talking about developing a genuine game. And again, I'll give a bit of time for people to place their votes. We're getting quite a spectrum of answers here. And I guess I avoided adding how long is a piece of string as one of the possible answers, because of course that's also a valid answer. It depends on what you're trying to do with the game and what the size of audience is, and sophistication, etc. So I'm going to end that poll and I'm going to share the results with you again. So we can see a reasonable amount of number, think between 10,000 and 50,000 pounds for. Well, we'll see later on in this session what might be reasonable. So the third of the polling questions, who would you, if you only had the budget to design to pay for one coronavirus game, who would your game be designed for? Who do you think we should be designing a coronavirus game for? And again, you've got a number of options: national political leaders, health policy makers, teachers, trainers, educators, healthcare workers, general public, business leaders, or other. So who do you believe that we should be developing a coronavirus game for if we've only got a budget for one game. Okay, I'm going to end polling now and share the results with you. And you see the general public is the prime choice there. 62% of you think the general public. Well, that's good really, because the demonstration that I'm going to do later on with you is based on the general public. So, final polling question at this part of the course: given only one choice, what do you think the main objective of a coronavirus game should be? So we're designing a game, and you selected that we should design it for the general public. And what should be the main objective of that game? Should it be to reduce the number of infections, reduce the R value that we hear about on the news every day, reduce the number of deaths from coronavirus, educate, inform and prepare people, reduce the total impact cost of coronavirus, prevent economic collapse, change behaviours of the population, and protect the most vulnerable in society? Again, we're getting quite a decent response to this question. 73% of you have voted. And the results of all of these polls I will be sharing with you, not only just in this session, but also after the event. I plan to share some of the results of the polls in a follow-up email. So you can see 50% of the answers are for changing the behaviour of the population, but we do have quite a bit of response for educating, inform and prepare people. So I'm going to stop sharing the results now and close the polling down and go on to talk about what we're planning to do in today's session. Well, this is how I plan to structure it. I'm primarily going to be talking about the challenge of gamifying coronavirus. And to do that, I feel that I need to just give you a few thoughts on gamification theory and practice as they're applied to learning and development and behavioral change. So you will see the theories that I'm outlining will be taken from the white paper that I wrote almost 9 years ago now on gamification. And it will be particularly tailored towards the coronavirus situation. Once we've gone through this, we're going to talk about the elements that we're going to use in creating this coronavirus game, about the relevance and the meaning of immersive experience and why they're important in developing a gamified learning environment. We're going to show you how to combine gamification and immersive technologies and how to repurpose existing learning content within a gamified immersive experience. And we're going to close up after we've done a demonstration of an example prototype coronavirus game. We're going to show how you can transition using gamified learning experiences from teaching to encouraging learners to explore, to finally how you then translate that into some kind of assessment that provides feedback to the learners, and a little bit finally about gamified learning and the flipped classroom. I want to spend as much time as possible on the coronavirus game itself, but I have to go through these theory and practice of gamification. And these are solely my thoughts and ideas. So you don't necessarily have to agree with me. I'm happy to take comments and also to ask you, if you do have any questions that you want to pose, please use the Q&A box, and I will try and answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. So my thought for today is based on a parody of William Shakespeare, and that is to say that I believe that the whole of life is a game, and that all living creatures are merely players, and that each creature in his time plays many parts. So I believe that gamification is actually embedded into our DNA, not only the DNA of human beings, but also living creatures. And anybody who's owned a pet, an animal, a dog, or a cat, will understand and question whether we are gamifying our pet or whether our pet is gamifying us. Because animals learn very quickly how to get what they want from human beings. And so the process that they use to learn how to do this is the same kind of process that we use in gamification. So I think that gamification is a fundamental skill that all human beings are born with. Right from the time you're a baby, you learn about the world around you by gamifying your environment, testing out your parents, seeing how they react, checking out on the world around you, and learning and developing through the game that is life. And in fact, I love this particular graphic. And I would argue that every human activity can be viewed as a game. And there you see this young boy sat at the window, looking out the window, and his mantra is that reality is the worst game ever. And a lot of people who are suffering from lockdown at the moment probably would agree with that sentiment. So this is the first of the gamification concept that I want to share with you. And that is to suggest that every single human activity, whether it's regarded formally as a game or not, can be viewed through a gamification lens. And in this gamification lens, just as William Shakespeare suggested that each man in his time plays many parts, through the gamification lens, in every human scenario, every human activity, different individuals will be playing different roles. And this is quite important because if we start at the top, we look at the games master. The games master are people who have, you could say that they are the games developers or the games designers. These are the people who decide what rules, what outcomes, how the game should be played, and they require an understanding of human nature and human motivation. So they arguably have the most influence in the game, any game situation. Underneath them, the next layer that has the next level of influence are the players. These are people who are directly involved in affecting the outcome of any individual game. And I've used this particular model based on, as you might be able to gather, on football, where I've shown Jose Mourinho as being a games master, a tactician, a strategist, who uses game psychology and mechanic to motivate his players, mold them as a team, and develop their talents to achieve an outcome, whether that's winning a cup or winning the league or what have you. Underneath that layer, we have what I've described as fans. These are people who are not players themselves, but have such a keen involvement in the game, whatever it is, that they're willing to invest their time and their money, their loyalty, their passion, their support, and their engagement. And they are very important in the sustainability of any kind of game activity. Underneath them, you've got the spectators. Spectators are not really interested in being involved in the game. They maybe read about it in the papers, but they really don't do anything to try and influence outcomes. And the hermits are the bottom level, and they're totally independent. They're not bothered about the game at all. So this is a gamification lens as applied to soccer. Now, if we look at it in the context of coronavirus, we can ask the question, who is the coronavirus games master? Who is developing the game? Now, I'm talking about the game that we're going to be looking at this afternoon. I'm talking about if you regard coronavirus as a game that everybody is involved in, who is the games master? Who decides the rules? Who makes the decisions that are designed to motivate people? And who are the players? Well, the players, you could argue, will be the care workers and all the staff, the people who are following the strategy. They have a lot of influence on the outcome because they care for the people who are ill, and they also are involved maybe in health policy. Underneath that layer, the fans, are not necessarily fans, but people who have a reason to be interested in the outcome of the coronavirus game. These are likely to be patients and people who are affected by lockdown. Underneath that layer, you've got the spectators. Very few people, I think, in today's situation, you could argue as spectators because everybody is involved in the coronavirus game. So at this point, I want to bring up another poll, and I want to ask you who you think is the game's coronavirus games master. So who is the person who sets the challenges, the rules, and the outcomes? Is it the national political leaders in whatever country? Is it senior health policy leaders? Is it the pharmaceutical industry? Is it the World Health Organization? Or is it Mother Nature? So who is pulling the strings in the coronavirus game? Well, again, I'll give you a few minutes to fill in your answers before I end the polling and share with you. Okay, so I'm going to end the polling now and share the results with you. See, most of you believe that the national political leaders are the coronavirus games master. I want to act as a devil's advocate here and suggest that actually the coronavirus games master, you could argue, is Mother Nature, because it's Mother Nature, in a sense, that devised the coronavirus game. It's Mother Nature that knows the outcomes and consequences of the virus. National political leaders and everyone else, we're still struggling to really fully understand the virus. So we don't really know what the rules are. We don't really know the outcomes, and we don't really know still how to respond to the coronavirus challenge. So thank you for those results. And again, I will be sharing these later on after the event. So that's the gamification lens as applied to coronavirus. The next concept I want to share with you is the gamification cycle, because if you are developing any kind of game, or you're gamifying any situation in your own business, your own life, it has to work like this. These are what I think are the most important components of a game. And a game always has to start with a challenge. Now, a challenge can be something that you become aware of, that you need to take an action for. It can be a desire in your life to achieve something, a goal. It can be many different things, but it presents itself as a challenge in the sense that you, if you're going to participate in the game, want to achieve a particular outcome. And when you have this challenge, you respond to the challenge. And in order to play the game and develop skills in playing the game, you need to have some kind of measurement of the result of your response and have this presented to you in the form of feedback, which then presents you with a new situation and a new challenge. So the gamification cycle can be applied to any human activity. And it is also worth noting that it's very personal. It changes with different individuals, different situations, different scenarios. All of these, the cycle remain the same, but the responses, the challenges, the measurement and the feedback will be different for each individual. So as applied to coronavirus, the challenge is coronavirus hits your country, you become aware of it. So what kind of response are you going to make? What can you do? Well, in the early stages of coronavirus, many people didn't need to do anything because the game rules hadn't been established, the outcomes hadn't been established. There was no real way of measuring what was happening. And so this gamification cycle has been developing and evolving as time goes by. So as time goes by, there are new challenges, there are new responses required, there are new ways of measuring the outcome of that response and of providing feedback to the people who are involved in playing this game. So the third concept I want to introduce to you is what I call gamification elements. Now, these are all elements that make up a gamified scenario. All of these elements, or most of these elements, are present in any single human activity. Life is full of chance and uncertainty, so everything we do involves usually all of these items. And in the case of coronavirus and the game that we're going to be looking at in a little while, we have scenarios. These will be the immersive environments. We will have challenges, what you're required to achieve as a result of the game. There'll be rules which say what you can and what you can't do. Elements of chance and uncertainty and risk are being built into the game that you'll be trying. There will be rewards, incentives and penalties in this game. There will be a chance to explore. There will be a way of measuring your success or failure. There'll be an opportunity to discover new information. Hopefully there will be some learning and development involved when the game is played. And there will be reactions to any action that you take. And there will be tools to measure the outcomes of your decisions and provide you with feedback. So these are the coronavirus game elements. And the final, before I go on to the final concept in gamification, it's just an example of a game element, the rules element in the sense of coronavirus. Okay, these are rules that have been introduced by the UK government: stay home, protect the NHS and save lives. And this is really trying to follow the gamification cycle, which says, okay, this is the situation. Your response should be to stay at home. This is what you're aiming to do to protect the NHS and save lives. And what we need to do is provide ways of measuring the outcomes of your actions and feeding that back to you. And similarly, you've got the do the 5 message, which 5 basic elements in responding to coronavirus. So the final concept, before we actually move on to the game itself, is what I call the influencers. I mentioned that any kind of gamified environment is very personalized. Not everybody will want to play the game. Not everybody will respond well to playing the game. A lot of people will want to be spectators. Only a small minority will probably want to be really active players. So what is it that influences people to choose what kind of role they want to play in any game environment? I've shown a list of what I call the A-list influence. These are some factors which will influence the behavior of players in a game. And this is very important when we're dealing with something like coronavirus. If, as you suggest, the aim of a coronavirus game is to influence human behavior, we need to be wary or understand what are the influences that are likely to affect majority of the general public and change their attitudes and behaviors. Well, a couple of influences I want to share with you. One is in the A-list, the authority. And authority, traditionally, in my growing up period, were people wearing uniforms, people had a status in life, teachers, parents, policemen. If you were told by any of these that you were supposed to do that, then it was likely to influence your behavior. But today, with social media, we have really a totally different kind of authority to which affects influence. So who are you going to be influenced by in the coronavirus situation? Will it be the Prime Minister? Will it be the person who's developing health policy? Or will it be a star of social media like David Beckham or Justin Bieber? Because some people will be more influenced by people that they identify with or they respect, and consequently they are more likely to listen to people who maybe don't have quite the level of knowledge or understanding that they might have in providing advice. The other A-list I want to share with you is called adjacency, and I've chosen this one because I think it's relevant to the coronavirus situation. And adjacency means how close or how relevant is the game to your situation. So if you know somebody who is sick with coronavirus, if you have a friend who's died from coronavirus, you are more likely to be influenced in your attitude and behavior and willingness to play the game. If, on the other hand, you are living in a situation where you're isolated from coronavirus and everybody you know is healthy, living their ordinary lives, you might begin to question whether you need to change your behavior or get involved in playing this game. Okay, so now we want to just look quickly at why the current situation lends itself to the use of technology for a coronavirus game. Well, the first thing is, of course, we can't have the close face-to-face physical contact that we have been used to prior to the beginning of this year. And so the element of being influenced by someone physically close to you has been removed. So if you're a teacher, if you're trying to influence behavior, that face-to-face contact and the feedback that you get from face-to-face contact and the intimacy and the relationship of face-to-face contact have gone missing. So in order to compensate for this, we need to think about what technologies can help to overcome that limitation. And so we need, in the coronavirus situation, certainly we need to influence understanding and awareness and behavior change. We need to be able to measure how we're getting on and provide that in the form of feedback. In order to influence people, we need to have the most relevant context and scenario. So it's no good creating a learning scenario, say, based on the North Pole, if you happen to live in a small market town in Northamptonshire. So the more relevant the context is, the more immersive that environment is likely to be, because you will be able to identify with it. And finally, there is a need for positive behavior change, as we're in a situation that is unprecedented in human history. And the outcomes of the coronavirus game in real life are very, very uncertain. So what do you need? Here are some of the enabling technologies. So these are basically the technologies that I used in creating the coronavirus game that I'm going to share with you shortly. A drone, a 360-degree camera, a smartphone, a laptop, and some software. So these are the tools which are readily available and affordable for a lot of people. And if you added the cost of all of these things together, it would come to under £5,000. So now, why a gamified immersive experience? What's different between what's the difference between a game and a gamified immersive experience? Well, the first thing to point out is that the immersive experience enables you to provide a relevant context. So what you see in the background here is the kitchen of my home. So this is something that I can identify with. And it's also something that anybody who has a kitchen can identify with, because there will be the same kind of common bits of furniture and tools in it. The fact that this is a 360-degree image provides an opportunity to explore, which is a way of encouraging learning. It's an immersive environment which can be enjoyed on a smartphone, on a laptop, or with a virtual reality headset. And as you will see, or you may be able to pick out, that along the top here, we've got tools to measure and provide feedback. So hotspots found, questions answered, score, time remaining, hotspots here, score here, seen, number, and a progress bar at the bottom. So these are the measurement and feedback tools that we'll be exploring the development of in our game. So what do we need? Well, we've got the technology, and in order to be able to create this coronavirus game, we need relevant 360-degree images and or video. I'm not using video in this example, but you can use 360 or ordinary video in these learning experiences. We need some relevant learning context. So these could be items and artifacts that are relevant to the learning objectives. We need tools to measure and provide feedback. We need clear objectives for the game. And in order to engage and interest people, I suggest that we also need a certain amount of innovation and creativity. So here are some examples, 360-degree, a variety of 360-degree images in a hospital environment, at an exhibition, or there's an aerial drone photograph, which actually is the same photograph that I'm going to be using in the coronavirus game. Some content, which can be information about symptoms, it can be messages, it can be information about a battle plan. And at the bottom, I'm going to show in more detail what's called a gamification skin. Now, this is one of the new developments which has really been a catalyst for me organizing this webinar today, because this is a facility and a functionality that was only introduced a couple of weeks ago into a piece of software that I've been using for some time now. And essentially what this does is to provide a framework which allows you to set up the measurement and feedback tools that can be applied to your whole game. So you don't need to do any programming to provide the measurement and feedback. All you need to do is to concentrate on the hotspots, the immersive environments that you're going to use, and the questions that you're going to use during the game. So if there is time, I will hopefully demonstrate more than one example of a gamified learning experience. But what I want to do now is to go straight into, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to go straight into showing you the gamified learning environment, the coronavirus game. This is a rapid prototype. It was developed in a very short space of time. It's not meant to be the final thing, but it will give you an idea of some of the components and elements and influences that I've been talking about earlier on. I'm just going to bring up the chat screen. There are people, Carl Bridge is offering his services, and Coppens has given something in the chat. And that's something I also intended to mention, is that I'm very gratified that in the audience of the registrations, we have a lot of people with a great deal of experience in developing serious games. And I'm not pretending or trying to suggest that serious games and gamified learning experiences can be developed very cheaply in all situations. What I am suggesting is that some of these rapid prototyping tools can help to further the cause of gamification and create really worthwhile examples in certain situations. So question and answers. So let's see, from Tim the Magnificent Fallsman, we have two questions. Training, it was Chris, Tim's training was with systems or ecological modelling. Would I describe this training closely aligned with gamification? Well, I think modelling and simulation is very aligned with gamification, because simulation is and modelling is definitely based on taking an action, seeing what happens during that action, and getting measurement and feedback. And how do I envisage gamification as part and parcel of community decision support for regular practice? Well, I'll come on to that a bit later on, because that's not a trivial question. And I really want to try and get down to the meat of showing you an example of hopefully, possibly more than one example. So I'm now going to go to share with you the Coronavirus Game Challenge, as I've called it. So there is a website, there is a URL which you will be directed to after this event, either in the form of an email follow-up, or I can simply tell you how to find it at the end of the session. What I'm actually looking at now is an executable Windows file. In other words, this is a program file which is the game. It's a web-based game, but you can also download it and run it on a computer without access to the internet. And that's quite a convenient thing. So any of you who want to play the game after this webinar will be able to try it, and you will also be able to download either a Windows or an Apple Mac compatible file so that you can run the game offline. So this is what's called the loading screen, and I've set it so that the loading screen stays up until I click to continue. So I'm now going to go into the game. The reason I didn't do it straight away whilst I was talking to you is that I've set this game to have a time limit. So I've only got 4 minutes to play the game, and if I could easily waste those 4 minutes simply telling you about the splash screen. And so I really wanted to spend more productive time in the game itself. So here we go. I click to continue, and it comes up with a screen which shows what's called the little planet, and above this screen are the game objectives and rules. I think this is quite a useful thing, a very common thing in any kind of game situation. People need to know how to play the game, what their objective is. So I've provided this little screen to give you some information. So our objective is to score as many points as possible by answering questions, discovering hotspots, staying safe at all times. You're free to navigate Coronavirus Town as long as you don't catch the virus. Okay, so I'm going to close this down now. And in the top corner, I mentioned to you these measurement and feedback elements. You can see a time clock ticking away. And I've only got 3 minutes and 5 seconds left. And you'll notice that when I go down to below 3 minutes, my health score, which my health status at the bottom is this red bar, that's dropped by 10 points already. I haven't answered any questions. I found 2 hotspots, strangely enough. There are 5 hotspots in this scene, and I'm on scene number 1 or 6. So I've really got to pull my finger out and find some hotspots. But I've got a question button here. So I'm going to click on this question button. Now, where would you like to go? Now, where do I want to visit? Okay, this is the first part of the game. Now, this may be a trick question, but I'll maybe fall for this trick question and say, well, I'm getting a bit thirsty now after talking to everyone, so I want to go to the coffee shop. Oh dear, it was shown as red. I'm in the coffee shop. The coffee shop's not open. It's closed because of coronavirus. That's a bad idea. The shop's not open. Now, in order to continue with the game, I've got to find the hand sanitizer. And my health score's already dropped to 45. I can see that. So I need to, the other thing that I can do here is I can zoom in and out with my scroll button, and that's quite useful. So I'm going to find, there's something on the door here. what is it? Hand sanitizer. So I can click on that, and as soon as I click on it, I recover some of my points, but I need to get out of the coffee shop. So way out, click to exit. So now I'm back in. Now I know I don't want to make that mistake again by clicking on a coffee shop. Let's see what else there is in the town. And as I move around, I move across this hotspot. It says supermarket. What happens when I click on there? Yeah, the supermarket's very busy. You can't go there. No, I can't go to the supermarket. It's not affected my health in any way. Let's see what else we've got. We've got a hidden hotspot here, which is a museum. I suspect that if I try to go to the museum, I'm going to be in trouble. So I'm going to, there's another one. There's the coffee shop. I don't want to go back in there again. I need to do something to get me more points. Okay, well, because I've had the benefit of designing this game and playing it, I think maybe I ought to go home. I am home now. I'm in the kitchen, made a great choice. My health score's gone up to 75, and I need to find hotspots here and find answers which are going to help me to stay safe. I'm nearly running out of time. I've only got 6 seconds left. There's a little kitten down the corner there. What can I do with the kitten? My time has finished. So that's the end of the game. I got a health score of 75. I can find more details about my health score. I completed 3 out of the 6 scenes. I found 8 items. I got 1 incorrect question. My health status was 75. So that provides me with the result. So what I'm going to do now is to repeat the game. And so when you play it, you'll have a little bit of a head start because you'll know what to look for. So if I repeat the game, I've had 1 chance to try it, and I've learned not to click on the coffee shop, and that home is a good place to be. I need to find ways of changing that knowledge into a better score. Okay, so I don't want to listen to Matt Hancock, although a video here could be something that provide me with useful clues. I'll take the risk, and I'm going to click on this question mark again. Where do I like to go? Well, I know I really need to go home. I'm not feeling ill, so I'm not going to go to the hospital. So I'm going to go home. Now I'm in the home environment. I've got a good health score, and I've got a lot of time left to find all of the hotspots and clues. And I noticed before that I had a little household pet there. So can you catch coronavirus from pets? Not sure. I will say no. Okay, that's the right answer. It's a good answer. According to WHO, you cannot catch coronavirus with pets. A pet may help your mental health during lockdown. Oh, so that's good. Let's see. Well, we've got a question here. Let's see what that question says. How long should you wash your hands for? Well, I've got a feeling that it's, well, I know it's 20 seconds. So I'll click on that. Well done. The video shows the recommended procedure for washing hands. So if I want affirmation of this, I can link to this YouTube video and play the YouTube video. I don't want to waste time doing that because I'm down to 2 minutes already. I've got to find other hotspots in the kitchen. Let's have a look around. What's this? I can see a protective face mask. It's telling me that make sure you have face masks readily available and they're well fitted. Score 10 points. So my health score's gone up to 125. That's looking good. So I can't see other hotspots. So I'm sure there must be something in the kitchen, perhaps hidden. What's this? A hand sanitizer. I click on that. You found the hand sanitizer above the sink. Scored 10 points. Okay. So what else can I find here. Here's a hidden hotspot, which says I can go back to town. Well, maybe I need to go back to town because I'm looking at my score and I've only answered 3 out of the 4 questions. I only found 5 hotspots and I've only got a minute left. So I'll go back to town again and see if I can find any more places. I'll move my mouse around. Here we are, a school. What happens when I click on the school? What's the opening date for colleges and universities? Well, this was on the news today, I think. I think there's only FE colleges and secondary schools. So I think that's the answer. This is multiple choice. So I've got to click on OK. So I've got more points for getting that right. And so my hotspots found have increased. Where else can I visit? Shall I go to the pub? Now, no. Pubs are closed during coronavirus. I've got a penalty. My health's going to suffer. I can protect. Time out again. I can view my score. And when I'm showing the score, one of the things that impressed me about this software that I used to develop this rapid prototype was the fact that you can incorporate it into any LMS system. So you could, at this point, provide an opportunity to submit your score to the LMS system. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I've given you a couple of ideas. Now, I do recommend that you have a go at this game yourself. I will be sending the URL out to everybody who registered for this event, whether they're able to attend or not. So at this point, I'll just go back to the Q&A and see what questions we've got. Okay. Carlbridge. As investors for digital health entrepreneurs, we've seen an increase in gaming within the sector. Do you feel healthcare professionals are qualified to support patients in this way? Be kind, be safe, warm regard. Carl Bridge. Well, Carl, thank you very much for your question. I'm not sure whether you mean whether we should develop gamification immersive experience for healthcare professionals. I think I would say the answer to this is yes. And I would also argue that with the kind of tools that are available today, that these kind of gamified learning experiences don't necessarily always, certainly for rapid prototypes anyway, need to be developed by games companies. The tools are usable by probably technology literate people because they're pretty easy. Anne's actually asked the name of the software tool. Well, this is a very closely guarded secret, and but as you are one of the UK's leading experts of gamification, I can't get away with keeping it a secret from you. It's actually a virtual tour software called 3D Vista. And this is the software is actually called VT Pro. If you want to Google it, you can buy it, and all of the functionality that you've seen in the game that I showed you is incorporated within this tool. So Maria Todosichuk, I hope that's correct. Maria, what makes this game fun? Is it a game for kids to learn new ideas, behaviors in the coronavirus context? Well, it wasn't designed for kids, but it could be used by kids. And what would make it fun for kids will be if you had icons and environments which kids more closely identified with their own situation. You know, it could be a playroom or whatever. It could be a school classroom. Have you considered pausing the timer while the user reads infos or watches videos? Yes, you can do this. If you want to do it, it is possible within the tools that are available in this environment. What incentive is supposed to make people want to play this game? Well, that's a very difficult one. Here we get into the area of whether you've got intrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from developing a game which is fun. And if you want the best incentive for playing a game, I would say it's to make a game that is really fun, which has all of the elements that I mentioned in there, particularly chance, uncertainty, the feeling of achievement and reward when you get a good score in the game. If you want to use extrinsic motivation, this is where you say, okay, I'm going to give £50 to the person with the highest score. That may well incentivize a lot of people to play the game. Can it be adapted to medical, nursing, hospital? Absolutely. It can be adapted to medical, nursing and hospital-based simulation. And one of the other games that I've developed, I did exactly for that purpose. It was to teach people the nursing profession about trigger finger in the context of a home environment. But you could make it in the context of a hospital environment. And in fact, one of the places we could have visited in the game was called the hospital. I think actually that might be a good way of concluding the game as far as this is concerned, is to play the game and show you what happens if you decide to go to the hospital. So I'm closing the Q&A down. I will have a record of all the questions, and I will try and follow up on those after the event. Since we've been asked a question about hospitals, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen, and I'm going to go back to the Coronavirus Game Challenge and go back to where we left off. So I'm going to repeat the game now. So I'm going to start from scratch. And I hope those of you who are involved in hospitals and nursing won't be offended or think there's any kind of hidden motive behind designing the game this way, but I wanted to make it a little bit of fun. And as I mentioned, when you start the game, where would you like to go? Where do you want to visit? Well, it might be that in exploring, you want to go to hospital. So what happens when you go to hospital? Oh dear, I got feedback. I've managed to teleport myself to the opening of a new hospital. There's no travel allowed back home. You'll need to stay here until time runs out. So I'm doomed. My health score's gone down to 40 as a result of making this choice. Every minute that goes by, my health score goes down by another 10. So after at the end of the game, I'm going to have 0 health. All I can do is look around and see if there's any salvation. I didn't add any questions or any sanitizers or any hotspots in this hospital environment, mainly because I only had a limited time to develop this game. I actually started developing the game yesterday afternoon and finished it this morning. But that's only really because I had all of the 360-degree images available to me and a lot of the library. But that gives you an idea of, if you're trying to do rapid prototyping, how long it's likely to take you to develop new games. I'm going to go back to the Q&A now and see if there's any more questions. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions. So maybe if you bear with me a second, it might be interesting, if I've got time, to load up another example. And this is an example of using gamification in the digital heritage situation. This was a game that was developed for the village of Grafton Regis, which is a village not a million miles away from where I live, literally just down the road. And I'm going to be loading this game. So while I am loading, I'll just continue talking to you. I can't share the game until the game is finally loaded. But just to explain to you about this game, this is a game or a quiz that's based on the history of Grafton Regis, which played a very big part in the overall history of the United Kingdom. And it does illustrate a couple of points that I wanted to make, and that is the fact that these virtual tours, these quizzes based on virtual tours and questions, can also be used to guide people and give people training on how to take a quiz. And I've shown you how to navigate the quiz that I've just shown you. I just want to show you what happens with the Grafton Regis quiz. So I'm just going to load this very quickly. Okay, so this is the Grafton Regis immersive quiz. And again, it's got a start screen. And when I click to continue, it goes into an aerial view of this village, and it provides me with information about the quiz. Okay, in this case, I've got 7 minutes to finish the task. I just want to show you one thing. I'm not sure whether it will work, but if I right click, I have an option here to start a live guided session as a host. So this means if you are a teacher or an educator, you could load up a quiz or a virtual tool like this, and someone anywhere in the world who's logged on to the same environment can contact you, and they will be able to have a face-to-face conversation with you. You will be able to guide them round this quiz or this virtual tour, and you will be able to give them control over the navigation. So whilst you're showing this tour, they have the opportunity to be able to share the environment themselves. Again, I'm not going to show you this quiz because we are getting towards the end of our time, and I just wanted to finish off with a couple of slides. So to conclude my presentation, I go back to the slideshow. So these are some of the applications. I've shown you a healthcare application. It can be used for storytelling, and again, it can be used for heritage and community. Many different applications. You're really only limited by your imagination when you are developing these applications. So suggested approach is, if you're designing games like this, then rather than throw people into the deep end and say, try this game, it may be useful to begin with to help them with guided exploration, what I call onboarding. And in fact, this is what I've done with you by taking you through this coronavirus game. So you start with that, and then you allow them to try the exploration themselves. And then finally, they try the quiz, and at the end of the quiz, they get an assessment. And I mentioned right at the very beginning, one of the things that I wanted to mention during this session was the idea or the concept of the flipped classroom. The flipped classroom is where you transform your students into teachers. And one of the best ways of learning is actually to teach. You need to find out the information in order to be able to teach other people. So as a concept, why not provide students with the tools to develop their own immersive learning experience to share with their peers? So going back to the question that was raised earlier on by, let's see who it was, Marina, I think. Looking at the questions. Yes, Maria, sorry, Maria. Maria asked the question earlier on. Yes, I think students can develop their own games. Mary can be also asked the question whether it would be suitable for healthcare professionals. Yes, I think getting people to design their own immersive learning experiences means that they will be developing things in a context that is relevant to them and their peers, and so it's more likely to be accepted. So I'm very grateful to you all for joining me today. I'd just like to remind you in conclusion that we will be having on Friday our new normal networking session, which is at 2 o'clock UK time. This is a great networking opportunity. For those of you who have not been to one of these, it's very informal. People have an opportunity to share the stage. They have an opportunity to network with other people. It's very much like a cabaret style situation with a stage environment. So it will be a mixture of people meeting other people at the tables and going on stage and sharing their expertise with everyone. I want to just finally close with another poll, and this is where I put myself on the line probably a little bit. And what I want to ask you is, well, what did you think of it? You know, how was this webinar for you? These are useful feedback for me. Please be honest. If you didn't like it, you know, you're perfectly at liberty to say so. I won't be offended. There won't be any way for me to identify the people who thought that it was average, or even those who thought it was totally excellent. So I'll just give a couple of minutes for the voting to finish. Okay, so, well, this is what you thought of me. Majority, 35% thought it was very good. Some people thought it was totally excellent. Thank you very much. I'm happy with good and maybe even happy with average. As long as you got something from this event today, then I am happy. As I mentioned, this event is being recorded, and so it will be available and posted after the event. You will also receive an email thanking you for joining the event today and providing you with links to the game, future events, one or two other things. My next event, my next webinar after Friday will be a webinar which I've entitled Where on Earth? The Importance of Place in Everyone's Lives. And I'm hoping that people like Tim the Magnificent Forsman will join me as a panelist. I'm always looking for new panelists who share the same passion for the use of technology for improving life and creating a sustainable future. So you will get an email with a list of upcoming webinars and an opportunity to register for those. So, and also, can I just ask, as you are leaving this game, you will be asked to complete a survey form again, a little bit of feedback, what kind of events you'd like to see in future, etc. There were a couple of other questions. When we have so many excess from other causes due to people being afraid to go into hospital, is it a good idea to have people penalised like that in hospital? Well, Elliot, this was meant to be a bit of humour. It really wasn't intended to discourage people from going to hospital. It was just a fact of taking people to a foreign environment, and the fact that we have lockdown and people aren't being invited. It could have been done in a different way. I agree with you. It could have had questions. It could have had other options that make going to hospital a good choice. So it could have been a question based around people's medical condition and rewarding them for going to hospital if there was something wrong. What do I believe is a reasonable fee for the cost of development of these games? Well, as I say, Tim, it's as long as a piece of string. I think what is reasonable is for people to be paid for the amount of time and investment they make in creating these games and delivering them. Because you've got to remember that even if you develop the game and it's the best game in the world, if nobody knows about it or nobody can see it, then it's not going to provide any benefit. So you also have to factor in the cost of promoting the games, distribution, all of these things. But if you were saying a reasonable fee, how much would it cost if for me to develop that game for someone? Then it certainly would be under £1,000. So what you saw today could be developed for under £1,000 But as I say, it is using rapid prototyping. I'm pleased to see that we still have a lot of you hanging on in the room. Either you are there listening with rapt attention to what I'm saying, or you've gone off and had a cup of coffee. So I will stay here for another minute or so if anybody's got any additional questions. Thank you. I appreciate Elena's remark. Thank you for immersing me into mastering. Well, I don't know whether you'll be a master. Eliane, thank you for your generous sharing of knowledge. This is true, the most valuable currency in all walks of life. Very philosophical. Thank you, Eliane. Eliane Al-Hadef, by the way, I would say, in my opinion, is the queen of serious games. She has been a wonderful guide and mentor to me, and very generous in sharing her expertise with her Serious Games blogspot over the years. So if you Google Eliane's name, you will find a lot of rich information. Thank you very much for all of this. To say to Anna Sanford James, yeah, the masterclass has been recorded. It will be published. Jesus, Javier needs to go. Alessandro. Yes. Alessandro asked a question about how can gamification be used to target this part of the population? Which role for the so-called influencers? Well, this is very, very difficult, Alessandro. You'll always get a conspiracy theory. You'll always get people coming up with solutions. It's very difficult to stop. I noticed that Twitter are taking steps, and some social media are taking steps to take out bits of information that are dangerous and misleading. But people are influenced by these things, and social media has a lot to answer for. But social media in its own, by itself, is not. It's the way people use it, and it's the people who are using it for their own purposes that are a problem. And there's many, many moral dilemmas that are coming out of this coronavirus situation, not least the most recent event of the death of George Floyd and the impact that that has. No one would condone the kind of violence and racism that has been endemic in a lot of developed societies. And no one would advocate limiting people's right to make their feelings known in circumstances like this. But you see, if you have a government and health leaders who are trying to tell people to stay at home, and you have an influence which plays on people's passions that overrides their, I would say, common sense, but overrides their awareness of risk to themselves and other people, and motivates them to actually cause some damage. It's very difficult to understand or to know how to develop these. I guess if you're going to look at it as a societal issue, I think we need to be very cognizant of understanding the balance between human rights and the rights of the masses in society. And I think with the world the way that it is now, we will need to think very carefully about things like monitoring and measuring, and this is what the whole track and trace argument is about. So, Vinod, thank you very much for attending, and thank you all for attending this event. I'm glad you've got something from it today. I look forward, hopefully, to some of you, or all of you, joining next week on Friday, when we have the new normal networking at 2 o'clock. Next week, the Where on Earth, the Importance of Place in Our Lives, that will be at an earlier time of 11 o'clock. That's mainly to provide an opportunity for people on the other side of the planet to have a reasonable time of joining. So I know there are people in Australia, for example, and China who are interested in these webinars, and having an early start time enables them to join it. So thank you once again, all. I'm going to now end this session and hope to see you at the next event. Thank you.